Please take a moment and look around the room, see who your community is tonight. Maybe share a smile. And those of you at home, please take a moment and greet each other on Zoom. This is a good time to change positions if you are on the floor and you want to take your seat. So, welcome. Sorry, I'm having microphone issues again. I think my ears are too small. Not sure what I can do about that. Welcome to Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. My name is Thia, and I'm so pleased to be here on this last Wednesday in July. I got to bookmark this month. I opened July and I'll close July, and then I'll be not speaking for a while. So for me tonight, it's been, this particular Dharma talk has been a little bit of a challenge. I just came from a retreat, a 10-day retreat, and had those wonderful prolonged experiences of tranquility and lots of walking, meditation, and silence for 10 days. And I really thought I would emerge from that just bursting with stuff to tell you guys. And so much happened and came up that it was almost like, well, where do I even begin to put a talk together, you know, from all the teachings. The topic was emptiness and stillness. And who knew there was so much for 10 Dharma talks about emptiness. So much to say about emptiness. So the talk I'm bringing to you tonight is a hybrid. It's inspired by that time at Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. There were 100 other meditators there. But it's also deeply informed by Christina Feldman, another Insight meditation teacher who teaches in the UK, and I've been listening to her talks online. And this is something that she talks about a lot. So I have gratitude for Guy Armstrong, the retreat teacher, and also Christina Feldman for helping me put this talk together tonight. Tonight, I want to touch back into the foundation of our practice, which is stillness or tranquility, and see how this supports insight, how they interact, because you can definitely have stillness without insight, and you can practice insight meditation without stillness, because insight has a lot to do with mindfulness. Separated from each other, they're good, but they're not powerful when they're separated from each other. So samatha is the Pali word that means stillness or tranquility or calm. And this is when we have an attentiveness to a single focus, like we just did, where we want to be still, we want to hold our body still, we want to close our mouths and stop talking and find something that we just focus on. Like probably most of you use the breath, maybe a sound, or maybe scanning your body. Anything like that is a good thing to focus on. This is related to a term that we hear more in our practice, which is called samadhi. But that practice is more concerned with the fruit of the calming. So this is sort of the intro, the baseline. And then what comes out of that is a concentrated mind. And that's what samadhi is known. In samadhi, we can sustain intention for stillness, and attention to objects of mind. It's quite a powerful mind state. So don't worry too much about the distinctions. There will be a day-long retreat in November that will dive into this further. So often when we're in retreat, and sometimes in our personal practice, we can experience deep states of tranquility. And I know for me, that's what got me hooked and kept me coming back, because I'm wound pretty tightly most of the time. So I really feel like I need this practice just to unwind myself each day over and over and over. And when we do this, there's a temporary suspension of the activity of the body. And sometimes there's a temporary suspension of the activity of the mind, that the thoughts can actually slow a great deal. And when we do that, some of these feelings of restlessness or sleepiness or doubts can be put on hold. It's kind of nice. We could just be in a pretty peaceful place. So even though this practice is essential and of great benefit for us as meditators, deep tranquility alone does not liberate us from our state of being in a human body that brings suffering and stress. It's just part of the program. So samatha, tranquility, is a foundation for insight to arise. Our practice is insight meditation, and it's known as a wisdom practice. And insight is concerned with the development of clear awareness, where we start to have the ability to track what's going on as we're doing it. So we're fully inhabiting every moment, hopefully all the time, as much as possible. So samatha involves first bringing the mind to a resting place by focusing on something to keep the mind from what it loves to do, which is wander and think and go wild. These practices go hand in hand and they complement each other perfectly. So the retreat I just came from offered 10 days of the samatha practice, just stilling the mind, and then another 10 days of the vipassana practice. So when I walked into this hall for the second 10 days, there were 50 people there, and the hall was so incredibly quiet. Everybody was sitting as still as a mountain. You could have heard a pin drop in there. It was really impressive to see the level of stillness that sitting for 10 days can bring. So it's good to hear these terms. I don't want you to feel concerned like, oh, first I'm supposed to do this and then I do this. And what was that word again? That's not really important. I think the intention just to be still and calm the mind, and the knowledge that you can find something to focus on is going to move you in the right direction here. And because we're in a Sangha, we can ask each other and check with each other if we have questions. Some people think that tranquility practice is not important, and they even think that it can be a distraction. It's like, let's just jump into mindfulness, right? That's where it's at. But the deep states of stillness and absorption are really necessary for us to have a powerful practice of mindfulness, even though they're only temporary. When we get up from the cushion and walk out of this room, a lot of the settled focus that we have developed here tends to evaporate. That's why we have to do it over and over and over. Some people say that when we get up off the cushion, that the old mental patterns are right there and they come in exactly the same way, right as they were before. But I have found this is not actually what happens, that we are changing our brains when we do this on a regular basis. And I've personally experienced this. When there's sustained stillness, just this tranquil abiding, and we come out of the practice, the grip of mental meanderings is reduced substantially. The agitation is reduced substantially, and that tends to last a little bit longer each time. So we're expanding that part of the brain. We are creating more agency over the mind, so to speak, because we're willing to sit with it and watch it do its gymnastics and notice, we're thinking, we're remembering, we're planning, see what our habits of mind are. We're just patiently going, okay, I'm doing that again. That's interesting. So we're not making it wrong or beating ourselves up, but we are learning. We're being very honest about what our habits are, our habits of mind. So I have found that the tranquil attention harnessed with the awareness of the moment makes a powerful practice for relaxing and letting go. And because we're in an election year, we probably all need this more than ever. Learning to let go is a training of long-lasting benefit. As we grow older, we're definitely in a practice of letting go, whether we want to or not. We are forced to let go of a body that's changing, inability, and all kinds of things in our life that need to change and must change. So we're making peace with this idea that everything changes and we need to let go. Now, just because we decide that we're going to focus calmly on the breath doesn't mean that the mind suddenly cooperates. This practice of simplicity challenges our lifelong habits of distraction and grasping, which are reinforced when we wake up in the morning and check our Instagram feed first thing and look at all the pictures and catch up with everything. So I was speaking with someone before tonight's practice who said he does not look at his phone until 10 o'clock in the morning, and I really commend that. So I think that might be a good idea if we can manage that. In the meantime, we'll notice it without judging. I don't know about your phone, but my phone reports back like how much time I've been on. It's a little bit embarrassing sometimes. So despite this intention to rest in calm abiding, the mind tends to just regurgitate these thinking patterns and just delight in being lost in its own busyness. With gentle persistence, we can disentangle, and the stillness of mind does deepen. This is why we come together on Wednesday nights to sit here, to do this together, to make friends with people who are also willing to do this, and to be in small groups, do this with 2 or 3 people, and to do it as often as possible when we are alone in our home. This is what lays the foundation for true serenity. Because eventually the mind gives up. The body does begin to calm, and a deep sense of physical ease comes. The agitation begins to release, and we can rest in a greater sense of well-being. And I think this is what keeps us coming back when we begin to taste the fruits of the practice. Once the fidgeting and the dullness and the cravings begin to lessen, our doubts are also lessened by a first-hand experience of being penetrated by stillness. It's almost like the water dripping on the rock, changing the shape of the rock, drip after drip after drip. And at this point, when things begin to change, there's a great deal of happiness that can emerge for no reason. Happiness for no reason seems to be a byproduct of this practice. The immediate benefit of a still and tranquil practice is contentedness. We start to become more easily contented, and we have a greater capacity for things that used to really annoy us. So that, to me, is a huge benefit. Still, the samatha practice does not hold the development of insight as its primary purpose. The primary purpose is simply to find a place to be still and stop talking and calm down, just to focus. Inevitably, though, profound insights begin to emerge if we keep this up. One thing that we'll notice is that we often live with the projected promise of desire, kind of like the carrot that dangles out in front of the horse, just out of reach. We think somehow that our happiness is out there. We think that if we can just get it, attain it, if we had that job, that person in our life, that car, that would definitely make me happy. And so the promise of these satisfactions are just projections of our own happiness, drawing us right into these cycles of craving and pursuing and striving and attaining that are so very normal in our culture. These can even be fun for a short while, but not for very long. And then we're living right alongside the tension of always chasing these experiences and these things that usually end up not being exactly what we thought they were. What this mostly creates is churn, always wanting the next thing and the next experience. This is the agitation that is the projection of happiness outside of ourselves when actually it's residing inside. So the discovery of tranquility and stillness and the contentment that comes from it doesn't rely upon getting something or even getting rid of something. It doesn't rely on changing anything. It relies instead upon resources that are already awake within us, within our own heart and our own consciousness. This can be, for a lot of people, a shattering discovery. I think this is why on extended retreats, we see tears so much, and we can feel tears so much, tears of joy, but tears of compassion for delusion, all the delusion that we've experienced in our life. Once we realize that abiding contentment can be touched with stillness and we feel it and touch into it, we can more easily loosen the grip on wanting and delusion. And hopefully that comes with compassion for ourselves. We're all just learning. We're all just figuring this out, you know? Most of us were not taught this at an early age. At some point, you begin to feel greater equanimity about the highs and lows in life. We don't get tossed around so much because we've learned how to literally sit back and rest with this feeling inside the breath, the body, the isness of things without trying to change how we think it should be. We learn that we can trust in this quality of happiness that's found inwardly and that it's always there. So for me, this is one of the greatest benefits of going on retreat each year. This perfect container. Most retreat centers are beautiful. You slip into this deep, profound silence, usually all organic vegetarian food, prepared, served, cleaned up, and a quiet room to yourself. And everything is supported. It's really, really highly recommended experience. And the happiness that comes from this is like no other in my experience. There's also a sort of inner confidence that bubbles up because this practice is so empowering. It brings a collected mind. It's much harder to be disturbed or knocked off center when you've spent a lot of time, so to speak, on the cushion. It's said that nothing can disturb the tranquility of a calm and collected mind. When we further develop this ability to concentrate and we're aware of what's happening as it's happening with the insight practice, we discover that our own consciousness has an extraordinary capacity to see clearly, to penetrate deeply, and that brings this experiential confidence. A knowing begins to emerge. that brings a deep faith in the practice and in the ability to engage with life in a really creative way. We don't worry so much about the curveballs. We know that we have the capacity to be with it and figure it out no matter what. So we're changing the mind, we're changing the very culture of our mind, and this begins to show up in the outer life. We begin to loosen the addiction and entanglement with anxiety, all the drama, the busyness, the regrets. And what's interesting is so much of our identity is tied up in these the dramas and the busyness. We've kind of built an identity out of a lot of this. And we seem to begin to realize that that's not what and who we are. And that ruminating doesn't make our life better, and it doesn't liberate us or fix our life, but it does take up a lot of time, and it does essentially suffocate silence. When we're faced with a problem, usually what we do is we think about it. I'd like to encourage us to just sit with it, drop it like a stone into a deep well, the problem or the question, and then let go of it. And focus on being still, focus on the breath. Don't focus on the problem. And I think you'll be amazed at the insights that can arise with that approach to challenges. It's this kind of stillness that we witness how the mind is our ally and not our adversary. In this kind of stillness, the mind brings us insights and offers up increased powers of reflection and contemplation that even we can be surprised by. So this is how the mind becomes a great friend. This is how we go into tranquil stillness and we find wisdom in the spaces between our thoughts. This is how we discover our own capacity for serenity and become much less inclined to get snagged by every little drama that pops up. In closing, I want to mention the quality of non-stickiness. We begin to notice that the apparent solidity of things is actually created by our continual thinking and grasping and holding. And this is just a manifestation of craving. But this grasping is the fuel that the mind needs to make the contents of the thoughts linger. Without that grasping or interest, very little lingers or sticks around. We just don't have the interest to cause it to stay. So you've probably experienced this in your own meditation practice. Some practices, everything seems to stick. You just feel battered by thoughts and worries and restlessness and sleepiness, and agitation and turbulence is mostly what you notice in some practices, but you just note that. Then you have another meditation experience, same thoughts are present, and they just move right through. They don't stick. And so, what's that about? I think eventually, when we change the culture of the mind, we begin to have the latter experience more than the former. I think the former experience probably never goes away, but I think it gets less and less and less as we change the shape of the mind from the inside out. And we create a non-sticky environment. This is how we create a clear view of how holding on causes our suffering. We begin to increase the capacity to let go. And we're letting go, not like we don't care with apathy, but we're letting go with interest to see what happens if I let go of that thought. We let go with compassion, like, wow, I've carried that around a long time and it's not even true. We let go with understanding. A deep, deep understanding begins to dawn at some point. And this, my friends, is what brings happiness. So I think that that's a good place to stop. Kind of got on a roll here and wrote a talk that was a lot longer than it needed to be. But I hope that some of this was helpful for you. Many of the excerpts used tonight were taken from a program titled Stillness and Insight, offered by Christina Feldman at the Berry Center in 1999. And here they are, completely relevant for me 25 years later as I come out of retreat. And so the Dhamma is like that, you know? It's been true for about 2,600 years now. So I hope that you found some gems to treasure tonight. And I'd like to just take a moment of silence together with you now. Just 1 minute, please, to close your eyes and let all those words land. Thank you for your ears and your attention tonight.